Hi everybody, I'm Steve Stivers. I'm your congressman, and this is the next episode of Ask Steve. If you are interested in asking me a question, just use the hashtag AskSteve, and we'll try to get your video on. The first issues that I want to cover, I did a mailer on the balanced budget amendment. I had a couple of responses, one positive, one negative, that I wanted to relay. The negative response on that was from Earl in Pickerington, and he believes the balanced budget amendment's irresponsible and asked me how we would finance our federal government during times of national emergency. For example, how would we finance a war? Well, I believe there's a way to craft a balanced budget amendment like many countries have that create limited exceptions for a time of war. The way I would do it is have an exception for a time of war, so you're allowed to run a deficit during the time of war, and that expenditure has to be paid off 10 years after the war is finalized. So for example, we finished the war in Iraq a couple of years ago, and we would have 10 years to pay back the entire expenses related to that war. So it requires you to then run a surplus, but again, you only have a limited exemption. It's for those national emergencies. That's how I would do it. You know, it can be worded a lot of ways, but that's how I would do it. That's how many countries have done it, is they create exceptions for exceptional events like natural disasters, like hurricanes, like time of war. There's a way to have a balanced budget amendment and have limited exceptions. So that's how I would answer that, Earl, is there's an easy way to do that. The second one was from Mary, also from Pickerington. She also received our postcard on the balanced budget amendment, and she thinks Congress should reduce spending, and she supports a balanced budget amendment. And she thinks grants from the federal government that are unspent at the end of a period should then be returned to pay down the national debt. And requests for carryover, she thinks creates a part of our budget problem. She calls it use it or lose it. Mary, I think that's a great idea. You know, we need to make sure that the money that is out there is spent. If it's not spent, then it needs to come back to Congress. Under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, Congress has the power of the purse. We get to decide where money is spent. If it's not spent during the budget period, it probably should come back. I think that makes a lot of sense, Mary, and I would support that. Thanks, Earl and Mary, for your comments on the balanced budget amendment. Another issue I've heard a lot about on Facebook and other places is the diplomatic negotiations with Iran. And I've got a couple of folks who wrote in to us, Roy from Lancaster and Christopher from Grove City. Roy believes that the Iran negotiations are bad for America, and that it only benefits Iran, and that we're getting the wool pulled over our eyes. Christopher, who served in the military, says that he believes that anything that avoids a war, such as diplomacy, is far, far superior to war. And I certainly agree with Christopher that diplomacy needs to be given a chance, but I think I agree with Roy that we need to be given something that any agreement needs to benefit both sides. And I do believe the deal with Iran that's been proposed, the interim deal, gives Iran a lot. They lose the sanctions, but then we don't really get anything in return. What happens is they get weapons inspectors to come in, but because the way it works when you refine nuclear material, you know, you go all the way up to here to get energy grade nuclear material, and then you go to here to get weapons grade material, somewhere in here. Until you get to here, you're on the same path and nobody knows the difference. And so while sanctions would work every day, and they're like diplomacy, they're not war, to deter Iran, and they are working, or Iran wouldn't want to get rid of them. What happens in this interim deal is you don't know until they get to this point whether they're pursuing nuclear material for energy or for weapons. And you only find out at the very end, and it shortens the amount of time that you can actually take action of any type, whether it's sanctions or military intervention. It really makes the clock, it takes us down to a 2-minute drill like in football, and we only know at the very end. And that's the problem with this deal that was reached by Secretary Kerry. So I think this deal is a problem because we lose all this time, and during all this time, the sanctions would have been working, but we're going to lift our sanctions and wait and see if they're pursuing nuclear weapons for non-peaceful purposes as opposed to energy, and then we don't have much time to react. That's my concern with the deal, and frankly, while I support diplomacy in general, I'm very concerned about the specifics of this deal, and America loses a lot of time to react, and then what could happen, Christopher, is we could be left with the only option is a military option, which actually drives us closer to war, doesn't take us away from war. So I'm really concerned about this specific agreement. While I do support diplomacy, I'm concerned about this agreement, much like Roy. Thank you both for commenting, and I know we had lots of other comments on Facebook about the Iran nuclear deal as well, but I wanted to share my opinion on it. Thank you. I've been urged by a lot of school nutritionists to make sure that the requirements that are placed on schools work for the nutritional needs of their students and work to make sense. So I've worked on a bipartisan letter that is just like a bipartisan bill I had. 28 Republicans and Democrats signed off on a letter to Secretary Vilsack, the Secretary of Agriculture, to ask him to make these programs more flexible. And that was at the urging of school nutritionists. And Ron, who tweets at PigFarmer65, retweeted our press release with the hashtag common sense. We've gotten a lot of support on Twitter. I appreciate that. Please follow us on Twitter. Please follow us on Facebook. Please look at our YouTube channel and follow my website at www.stivers.house.gov. And we look forward to continuing this Ask Steve series. Again, if you want to ask a question, please use the hashtag AskSteve. And we'll look forward to the next episode.